following preview was begrudgingly approved for all audiences.
You're listening to Elevator Music.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Forward Thinking, presented by the Professional Collegiate League. I'm Ricky Vellante, and I'll be joined by my co-host David West shortly. As usual, we'll be welcoming guests, challenging the status quo, doing social good, and bringing about positive change to the world, while also talking a little bit of sports. In this episode, we have two special guests. First, we'll be joined by 10-year NBA veteran and PCL Athlete Advisory Board member CJ Watson. We'll be discussing his career in the NBA, the D League, and in Europe, his children's book series, entitled CJ's Big Project, the Quiet Storm Foundation, which CJ founded in Las Vegas, and the changes we've seen in the NBA in recent years, along with the NBA's bubble and the WNBA's wubble. After wrapping up with CJ, we'll be joined by award-winning sports columnist, formerly of the New York Times, now writer-at-large at the Undefeated, and author of the $40 Million Slave, Bill Rhoden. With Bill, we're going to discuss some of the power dynamics that exist in college and professional sports, how those have changed since desegregation in the 1960s and 70s, the importance of HBCUs, and how, in Bill's opinion, athletes can use their ever-growing power to start to shift the power dynamic that exists between management and the players. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe Forward Thinking on your favorite podcast platform and the PCL YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about the Forward Thinking podcast or the PCL, check us out at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking. We hope you enjoy the episode. And welcome back to Forward Thinking. I'm Ricky Vellante, joined by my co-host David West. With us today is another special guest, 10-year NBA veteran, also with stops in the D League and the Turkish League, and member of the Athlete Advisory Board of the PCL, CJ Watson. CJ, thanks for joining us.
Oh, appreciate me. Thank you for having me.
So we'd like to start it off just by letting our guests give a little bit of introduction on yourself, your background in sports, what brought you to basketball, and where you're at today.
CJ Watson, played in the NBA for 10 years, a teammate of D West. Started playing when I was younger, 4 or 5 years old, and just playing to stay out of trouble, things of that nature. And just developed a love for the game, passion for it. Never was the best or the most athletic, but I just feel like I had a good solid work ethic coming from the background of my parents and family and stuff like that. And now I'm a children's author, entrepreneur, investor, and that's pretty much about it.
Good deal. I'll ask you, man, what made you write the children's book? Man?
It was something that I honestly never thought about doing. It was just I was done playing. I said getting to the NBA was inspiration, and what can I do now that I'm not playing to continue being an inspiration for little kids and just trying to help kids navigate through life. And I said, why not write these books and tell my story, my journey through these books, and continue to drop little gems of knowledge in these books where kids can relate to them, and all these stories are true stories and things that happen in my life. And I think kids, all these things can happen in every kid's life, I feel like, in some way, form, or fashion.
Right.
Was writing always an interest to you, or was it just, like you said, just sort of a spark post-career, you wanted to get your story out there?
I think it was just a spark. I kind of like to challenge myself and see if I can do things in life. And it was definitely a challenge for me. And just like I said, it was just something I just thought about. I never really envisioned being a writer or author. I definitely like reading. I like reading stories. Kind of gets my creative gems going. I think that's just kind of what it was.
How much did being a dad contribute to that? In terms of you being a father, and how has that changed your outlook on something like that?
I think my kids, when I first got the picture from the illustrator, first person I asked was my wife and my kids, and at the end of the day, I know they probably won't lie to me. So the first couple illustrations, my daughter was like, I'm not really feeling it. So I went back to the illustrator, had them kind of work on it a little bit, and just kept going back and forth. So they were kind of like my critiques,
right.
And they kind of gave me the thumbs up or thumbs down. So it was kind of good just having them in my corner and trying to throw in ideas and bouncing ideas off them.
Right.
Any chance of further additions or other writings in the future?
So I have 3 out right now, and I have one more coming out probably around maybe November or December, and that one's kind of just the final one of this little series. So I'm not sure if I'm going to continue to do some more. Maybe I think I have a whole bunch of stories that I can do that could be great books for kids, but we'll see. What happens.
Good deal. Yeah, and so your career itself, tying back to that for a moment. So you played at Tennessee, big SEC school, big program. After college, you went undrafted. went to the Turkish League, to the D League, ended up going to the NBA. And what was those various transitions like? I mean, I have to imagine that going from a non-English speaking country to back to the States had to be a bit of a change for you as what you would have been in your early 20s at the time.
Yeah, I think I was probably 20 or 21. It was definitely different. Actually, after college, when I got undrafted, I went to Italy first, my first year. Italy and Greece. It was definitely a tough time. I was, like I said, a young kid. I really didn't want to be there. I was mad that I didn't get drafted. I thought I deserved to be in the league. So I really had an attitude of just going over there. I didn't really go sightseeing. I didn't really appreciate the culture. And then the second time around, when I went back to Turkey after playing in the NBA, I appreciated the culture a little more. I kind of went out and sightseeing, went to different cities. So I definitely had a better appreciation. I think I was just older and wiser. So, and when you're young, you kind of think you know everything, you know, your ways are right away. And definitely the second time around, I definitely had a better time overseas.
Now, you said you were angry.
Yeah.
When you got, but so I mean, what kind of year was that for you? How did you deal with that frustration? I mean, because for like the young players, young guys that might be listening,
Right.
how did you deal with that? Like that disappointment and then being frustrated, but knowing you still have to play and have a season and so.
So I just took it for what it was. I definitely was mad, angry, but I still worked hard, put the work in, and I think just overseas my first year, it was just a frustrating year for me being my first year overseas. Every month I had a new coach. So just imagine, you know, playing some games, 10, 15 games, and your coach gets fired. Now you got to adjust to a new coach every time. And I had that in Italy my first year for the first 5 or 6 months. So I had a new coach every time. So it was kind of tough being a rookie and trying to get adapted to the overseas game of basketball and trying to fit in and then also fit into the country, like learning little words here and there. And I was by myself. I didn't have no girlfriend, no nothing with me. My dad came in and stayed with me probably like mid-March for like a month. And that was probably the best time that I had, is having someone there to be able to be with me and see the things that I'm seeing. So it was definitely tough, but I didn't just sit in my room and pout about it, but I definitely went to work. But it was just hard just having a new coach every month.
Culturally, did you encounter any sort of, I know that in Italian soccer especially, it can be, black players tend to be targeted by fans home and away. Was that ever anything that you experienced playing in the Italian basketball league?
No, not really. I think the fans were hard on the white players, the black ones, the Italians, everybody. They were throwing pennies at us. They had that's the first time I seen like people like really taking sports like really serious. Like over there, they take sports like it's live or die over there. And like in America, it's they take it pretty serious, but it's not as bad. Like over there, they'll die for their city or their country. And that's the thing. I think that's the difference between America and overseas. But it was definitely a fun time. But it definitely was pennies thrown at us, lighters, all that kind of stuff. They had to have police escorts for us to go in and out of games. So it was definitely something new to see for a young 20-year-old person like myself.
Right? Did they have those drums?
And they had everything: drums, they had kettlebells, they had the lighters, fire hydrants, everything.
I went to see a friend of mine play in Spain one year when we didn't make the playoffs, and I went and watched him play in the Spanish League, man, and that they were beating these drums the entire. I'm like, yo, how can you even play with these drums? It was crazy, but people really don't understand the level that they.
It's a whole different level over there.
You had a pit stop in the D League, eventually reaching the NBA and the pinnacle, played for some really good teams and ended up carving out a role for yourself. Was that part of your personal growth as well? You mentioned you weren't always necessarily the most talented, but you were an incredibly hard worker. How was that process and that transition of really just finding a role?
Right. Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing. So when I came back from overseas, my decision was why I went to the D League was because I just had a daughter. And also I was like, let's give this NBA thing one last shot and see if I make it. And if I don't, I'll go on and do something else. And eventually I had a good solid month and then went to the NBA. And once I got there, I know all my teammates were happy for me when I got to the D League. And we were all sitting in the locker room. They were just like, don't come back, CJ. And those words kind of stuck with me. So I felt like I was playing not just for myself, but also, all my teammates and a lot of the guys in the D League, because that journey is just so up and down and it's pretty rough. But just trying to carve out a role in the NBA, I just try to fit in, try to be myself, try to use everything that people said I couldn't do, use that to my advantage and try to make those things, weaknesses stronger. And the things I was good at, just trying to make those even better.
Within the NBA, as David mentioned, the players that may be listening, what were some of the things that you took away in terms of carving out a role for yourself, but also, just the mental wherewithal that you've got to have to maintain a spot in the NBA for as long as you did?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more mental than anything, especially coming from the D League and signing a 10-day contract. Those 10 days could be the most wrecking up and down 10 days of your life. Because especially going to a team, I went to a playoff team and I didn't really play a lot the first few games. They threw me in once or twice, and then not knowing if they're going to pick you up for your second 10-day contract, and then so on for the third one. So it's just kind of just trying to be perfect for those 10 days and then 20 days and 30. And then after that, just kind of learning the business of basketball, trying to be professional, learning about numbers, stats, how all these things affect the game and affect your play. So I think I learned that over time, and as I got older, it became more and more that I would learn those things throughout the year.
I got a question. What was it like playing for Nelly? So I know me and you, we used to joke about it because when you and I don't know if was that the first team you played with in the league?
That was the first team, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a trip. So
Yeah.
we used to joke about, right? So Nelly used to play like these ridiculously small lineups.
Yeah.
And so when you were playing, you were actually like the 3 when he was.
No, I was a 4.
The 3 or the 4.
When you played for New Orleans, I think he started me one game at the 4. I had to guard Peja. Peja's like 6'9".
Right.
I'm like 6'2".
Right. What and Nelly kind of that whole people talk about small ball now, but Nelly was like the originator of it. So can you just talk about what it's like playing for what it was like playing for Don Nelson?
Man, it was fun. Like the practices, I think was the best part. Like he would walk into practice. He would have his dog walk into practice on the court. His dog would just be running around. This is the funniest like laid back situation ever in life.
Really?
And then we start practice like stretch 10 minutes, whatever. We do 3-on-2, 2-on-1 for literally 30, 45 minutes, and he's like, go home.
Wow.
That was our practice.
Wow.
But it was cool playing for Nelly. He was fun. He gave you the confidence to do, like, he would never take you out for bad defense. He would take you out for bad offense. Like if you weren't aggressive or you weren't shooting the ball, all that kind of stuff. And I think he's like the forefront, like you said, of a small ball, because he was doing that, probably back in his Mavs days or whatever. But
right.
He gets a lot of credit for the way basketball is turned into.
Now, how was that style? Right. So sort of not, I wouldn't say not being coached on defense, but not penalizing you for defensive mistakes, which you and I know that's what most coaches do. Like as soon as you mess up defensively.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he did have his defensive principles, but it wasn't like he just didn't care about defense, but he wouldn't harp on it as much as, offense. Because at the end of the day, I feel like, I think defense plays a big part, but I think offense also. If you can't score the ball, then you're not going to win a lot of games. But he was definitely fun to play for, man. Like he would just say the craziest things. But honestly, his plays like always worked. Like I still have his playbook in my house now, and every play that he drew up, it works every time. Side out of bounds, underneath, like all that stuff will work every time. I don't know how, but it worked.
Right. That's good, man. That's good.
What was your favorite stop along the way?
I would have to say there because they gave me my first chance, but I would also say that probably the Bulls. We got a great team. No one had egos. We all knew who the superstar was, and everyone kind of just fell in line after that. And we had the best record for 2 years. We just couldn't, get past LeBron and D Wade, but I think we had a good little run.
So beyond writing, you also started the Quiet Storm Foundation. Tell us a little bit about what its purpose is and what you guys do.
So we serve underserved youth here in Las Vegas in the community. We just try to give them resources and outlets to be successful in life. And the whole foundation started just when I was younger. I always wanted to give back. And I said, if I ever make it, to a level where I can give back, that's my goal, is to help other kids take on the certain journey and get to maybe where I am at, or get past me. And I think that's what we do. We have 3 or 4 different programs we do each year. A free basketball camp. And the idea was behind the free basketball camp was camps cost a lot of money when I was younger, and my parents couldn't afford those things. So I just wanted to be able to give kids a free basketball camp where they didn't have to pay. Parents didn't have to come out of pocket. They can come and learn some skills and also have fun at the same time.
Good deal. So how important, you went to Tennessee, known for the quality of its educational programs, or at least some of them. How important was that education to you throughout not only your career, but now post-career?
It was very important. That was the whole reason why I went to college. I wanted to be one of the first people from my family to go to college and actually graduate. And that was my promise to my mom and my grandmother, was to graduate college, not just to go play basketball, but I wanted to get my education and make sure I got my education and learn things along the way. And those things have helped me to do what I'm doing now, be an inspiration and kind of be like just a role model for kids, and also for my daughters. So I can't tell my kids, to study hard, to do all these things in school and get good grades and all this kind of stuff, and I didn't do the same thing. So it kind of goes to show. I'm just trying to be an example for them.
Now, how do you balance that? I think sometimes it's hard to give your kids.
Right.
Say you're not going to give your kids more than what you had,
Right.
You don't want them to necessarily go without, but you also have to figure out, how to balance it. So how do you do that?
It's tough, man. I'm not gonna lie, it's not easy, because I definitely, when I wasn't even a parent, I would always say, I want to give my kids everything that I didn't have. But when I actually got to that point, I did spoil my kids probably the first couple years. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
But now, especially my oldest daughter is 13. She just turned 13. I try not to give her much, but I try to make her earn everything. I want things to be earned and not give. And I think that's just the main thing, just teaching them basic morals and values, and teaching them along the way. So, like I said, it's not easy, but it's definitely a learning curve. I'm learning as a parent each and every day, trying to balance a teen, and then having a 4-year-old and having a newborn. I think it's just mind-boggling to me. It's a lot of work.
You think about, sort of when you came in the league and where the league was, and not basketball wise. And I think about this sometimes. Like, I think there was a shift and a different level of embrace in terms of, wanting to have, I don't know if it's just me, but just think about the relationship that a lot of guys now, right? You see guys bringing their kids around,
right?
Bringing sort of bringing your kids into the world. And when I first came in the league, it wasn't around. Like, you didn't bring your family to anything, right? And I actually had to learn how to do it, because for a long time it just wasn't something that we did in the league. But then all of a sudden it was like there was a shift. And then all of a sudden you see the kids around, you see it become a more family-oriented environment. At least that's what I experienced as I went from New Orleans to Indiana, San Antonio, and then ultimately to Golden State. Everywhere it got more family-oriented, you know what I mean, as I moved on. So how important is that, man? Because, when I came in the league, it was a different time. When I left, again, you got wives on the plane, you got kids on the plane, the team, it's just a different environment. How do you think that switch, right, has affected the league, and how did it affect you?
I think it's great for basketball, because at the end of the day, you're around your teammates, coaches for 8 or 9 months, but at the same time you're away from your family all those times. I think I was reading an article the other day about Steve Kerr and Matt Barnes, how he let his kids come to the shoot arounds and all that kind of stuff, and the breakfast meals in the morning. I think that's big. I think it's for kids to be able to see that and see people that they always see on TV, and be able to just see them in a normal atmosphere. I think that's big for a kid's future. And I think just bringing families around makes it even more better. Guys will play more relaxed, especially on road games. Play more relaxed, and but I think at the end of the day, it's just about having your family, your kids, your wife, all being a part of the journey. Because at the end of the day, they're sacrificing a lot also just to see you be successful in your career.
Right. Are you pushing your kids in sport? I know your daughter plays volleyball, right?
Yeah, she plays volleyball now. At first, I didn't really push her into anything. I just wanted her to do what she wanted to do. I didn't want to be that parent, because I've seen a lot of those parents growing up, and I've seen those kids hate their parents for pushing them into a sport. And I've seen that, so I don't want that to be me. But I just let her be free. And when she told me she didn't want to play basketball, it kind of broke my heart. But at the end of the day, I feel her, because it was just too physical for her. And she wasn't. She was actually the tallest one out there, but always falling all the time. So it was just funny just to see her play. But I think she's developed a love for volleyball even more, because it's not as physical. She can still use her height, her athleticism, and it's probably a better sport long term, as far as bad on your body and all that kind of stuff. So
you mentioned how important it is to be around family. What do you think of the NBA bubble and the bubble playoffs and all, where obviously players had to endure some stuff that we haven't seen before?
Right. At first, I wasn't really for the bubble. I think I was against it. Actually, I thought it was more powerful if they didn't play. But at the end of the day, I thought when they did play, they were all saying the right things. They were, still publicizing all the things going on around the world, which I thought was great. Because I thought once the bubble started, it would just all the talk, all the information we've been getting, all the people speaking out would just stop. But I think it kind of lighted a fire on there and brought more attention to it, I think. And I think it's great. You got to sacrifice some things, and I think that's what they had to sacrifice was family, and they did it for the right reasons. There was not one COVID positive test, so I think that was a good thing. And at the end of the day, they get to play the sport that they love to do. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Where do you think the league is headed? I saw some talk about Antetokounmpo potentially going to Miami, and about D Rose going to LA.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on just where the league is going?
I think it's heading in a great place. I think you're going to see more super teams. I think you're going to see more guys, especially because this is an era where guys, have more friends or are more friendly than back in the day, where
everybody was adversary. Right.
Yeah. There was you wouldn't see Jordan, trying to get Patrick Ewing on his team. They were gonna battle it out regardless of who won or who lost. But I think this new age, this new era, they're more friendly. They hang out all the time off the court in the summer times, things of that nature. So I think you're gonna see more super teams, and I definitely think Giannis is going somewhere. I don't think he's gonna stay in Milwaukee. I feel like he's gonna go to a bigger market. I think Golden State would be a great place for him. Surround him with more shooters, where people have to stay home and he can kind of go one-on-one. But I'm just an old NBA player. I don't know nothing.
Speaking of where the NBA is going, in terms of some of there's been a lot of people that have been critical of the league, and I think unfairly so, especially now that there's been a bit more digging on viewership numbers and all of that.
Yeah.
I'm personally, I commend the NBA and the approach that they've taken in terms of allowing athletes the room for, letting their personality, their own flair, their own voice come into this. But so, going forward, where do you see that continuing to grow? And, how powerful and important do you think it is for the league to allow its players to continue to function in that manner?
I think that's why the NBA is probably the best league, if not the best, in between all the sports leagues, whatever, because they let their players talk freely. They don't kind of try to hush them or say you can't say this or that. I think the NBA has done a great job of letting players speak freely and speak what they have in their minds. And at the end of the day, I think the NBA has done a great job also by advocating for all the Black Lives Matters and people dying and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a great segue, and they're going to, I think, continue that for years and years to come. I don't think it's ever going to stop. I think more leagues are probably going to take that role with letting their players speak freely and speak what they want, as long as they're saying the right thing and they're not, embarrassing the league or their families or the teams. I think it's a great thing is to speak freely.
Right. Yeah, and the NBA, always they know how to manage. They just and I think the one thing that you can attest to this is like they're probably a little bit too hands-on at times, right? Like they always want to know, and always are trying to figure out how we can best be of service, right? So I think that as well as you can handle, professional sports and tons of egos and people with individual power, groups with power. I think they do it, and Adam has figured out a way to do it probably as good as anybody. Again, because he could have had they could have some major hiccups. I mean, you see what's going on with the NFL. I don't really watch, the numbers when they talk about NBA viewership, because we know that young people don't watch the game the way that we used to. No 15-year-old is sitting down watching a 2.5 hour basketball game. They're gonna be doing something else. They're going to watch the game and track it through their phone. And then, after the game, they're going to watch, 10, 15, 20 minutes worth of highlights from 5 or 6 different sources. That's how they watch the game. That's how they consume the game. So, from my view, the game has never been more popular. I mean, kids know everybody. And you have, it seems like these adult men are bigger fans now than these the young players. So, again, the game is just evolving. And, like you said, man, I think that, as long as they continue to do right by the players in terms of just, not making the players feel boxed in,
Right.
the NBA is gonna be fine and continue to win.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to definitely blow up.
Yeah.
Thinking about the bubble, I was on the phone with David when George Hill announced that the Bucks were not going to play that night.
Mm.
What'd you think of that? Were you surprised? I guess is part one of the question, and then part two, what'd you think of the move in general?
I was definitely surprised, but I thought it was needed. I thought something was needed. Didn't know what, but I thought it was definitely needed. But it takes a big step just for them not to come out and play and put their foot down. I think that's what the world needs at the end of the day. People stepping up and saying, we don't take this anymore. We want things done right. We want justice for all. And I think that's the way to go. And like D. West was saying, the NBA has done a great job of letting guys and teams speak freely. And I think it's only going to get better and better throughout as the league continues to evolve and get bigger and they try to get ready for next season.
My last question, and then I'll let David get his usual last one in there as well. What did you think? So obviously we've been talking about the bubble, but the WNBA bubble and what the athletes in the WNBA have been doing, both in terms of advancing the sport, but also creating a similar platform with maybe less protection than NBA players have. What have you thought of that and that league's evolution and what those athletes have been able to quite successfully do in the past few months?
I think it's been great. They've been able to, I feel like you said, they've been able to speak more freely with less protection, like you said. And they brought their daughters, brought their sons to the bubble. We're still being mothers while playing basketball. Like you said, brought their kids on for the ride, which I think is great. Little kids need to see that. They need to see their parents or their mothers speaking out, being aware of situations that are going around. And I think it was great. Like I said, I have nothing bad to say about it. I think it's great. The league is getting bigger and better. I'm a fan. I've always been a fan of WNBA. My daughter actually watches every game, but she just doesn't play basketball anymore. But she watches it, and she knows what she's talking about. She knows the players. When they have games here in Vegas, she goes and she knows all the players, and she looks up to them. So I think that's a big thing. Also, having a team in your own city. I never had that growing up, and just for her to have role models to look up to.
Nice. My question, CJ, I always ask about your routine, like the importance of routine. So what is your morning routine? Because I believe the way you start your day really gives you gives you that balance to complete whatever it is you have to complete moving forward. So what is it that you do, routine, rituals, whatever, to start your day? Now
I wake up probably about 6:37, brush my teeth, all that kind of stuff, walk my dog. That's pretty much how my day starts.
Yeah. So you're in Vegas, so it's like 80 degrees in the morning.
Sometimes, yeah. Right now, yeah, but it used to be like about 100. So I used to walk out in my underwear. I ain't gonna lie. I used to walk in my underwear, just walk my dog, come back in. By the time I'm inside, my daughter's on the computer. She's playing games and start making her breakfast and things of that nature, and then just going up to doing the normal daddy duties, cleaning up, and then doing things that I need to do for my book and stuff like that. But I think, like you said, starting your day off is the right day, is the right thing, and doing it in a positive manner. I try to read in the morning sometimes when I have some free time, but not every day. But definitely get some reading in to help get your mind in peace.
Good deal, man. Well, we appreciate your time, CJ. I'll holler at you, bro. Everything. It's all good. We appreciate the time, and it's a great show.
I appreciate y'all, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Keep up the great work, CJ. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
And welcome back to Forward Thinking. I'm Ricky Vellante, joined by my co-host, David West. Joining us today, another special guest, we have Bill Rhoden, retired columnist at the New York Times, contributor to the Undefeated, and author of The $40 Million Slave. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. How are you guys doing?
We're good.
All good.
Good. Just a couple corrections. Not retired. I resigned from the New York Times, and I then became a columnist with ESPN's The Undefeated. Retirement probably won't come for another 40 years. And so since 2016, I resigned from the New York Times in 2016. As you know, the Undefeated, I'm not sure if you're familiar with ESPN's The Undefeated, but I was involved, that sort of the creation of it before it had its name. But the cornerstone of my involvement is something called the Rhoden Fellows. They established a fellowship in my name called the Rhoden Fellows, and that's a 1-year paid fellowship each year for 6 students from historically Black colleges and universities. And we just named our 4th class. So I oversee that, help run it. It's been really outstanding. The idea is to get more African Americans into the sports pipeline, which is, as you know, probably one of the most segregated pillars of American society. And then also I write a column every week called Locker Room Talk. So that's what I've been doing. And yes, I still am the author of 40 Million Dollar Slave. That hasn't changed. But all that. So yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
And so, and you're an HBCU grad as well, Morgan State.
I went to Morgan State University back in the day. Played football there. It's kind of a unique time. I was there between 1968, 72, 73. But it was a unique time because during that time, and it's so interesting that prime time became the head coach of Jackson State. But during that time, 68, 9, 7, even before that, most of your great Black athletes, particularly in football, were going to historically Black colleges, particularly athletes coming out of the South. And it was sort of the golden age. In fact, I think one year, maybe 68, 69, Jackson State had something like 10 football players drafted in the NFL. Grambling had 10, Morgan had about, so, that was just sort of the routine because you had the American Football League forming, and that league was basically formed by getting athletes from small schools, but particularly Black schools. And when you look at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, you'll sort of be stunned by how many Black athletes came from places like Prairie View, Grambling, Southern, Morgan, and all that kind of stuff. So, and not only that, we had great scholars. It was just a whole great dynamic. And one of the fascinating things I found with running the Rhoden Fellows is, back the further you go back in history, Black folks had to go more or less to Black colleges. What's been refreshing with a lot of the young Black students who are now fellows is that a lot of them they went to HBCU because they wanted to. Right. A lot of them were like, a lot of them just got tired of being like one of 2 in their grade school class or high. They said, for 4 years, I just want to be somewhere where I could experience being the majority. So it's been great. So you didn't ask me, but
right.
That's sort of my history.
Can you talk us through what that shift was like? I was born in 1980, so I was sort of living through it. But by the time I became conscious. Going to Carolina, Duke, and all that stuff was normal. So Can you talk about the period through that shift, through the late 60s, through the mid 70s, like that, where that shift, where you saw it and how you experienced it?
Yeah, it was basically, desegregation. You had a lot of, it's funny, in 1970, I think was my junior year, I believe, at Morgan. And we had played Grambling every year. We started playing Grambling at Yankee Stadium, 68. And so one year, Yankee Stadium was going under not rehabilitation, but renovation. And so we played Grambling at Three River Stadium in September 1970. And the interesting thing about it was that we were playing Grambling during the day. And that night in Birmingham, Alabama, Southern Cal was playing University of Alabama in Birmingham. Right. And that they had that at that time, that conference was pretty much all white. It was all white. Alabama had recruited a Black athlete, but he couldn't play. But otherwise, it was all white. Right. And so Southern Cal came in there, and their team was basically damn near all Black. The quarterback was Black. Sam the Bam Cunningham, it was like a team, and they had big afros and all that, and they were going into Alabama, and people were like, it was like people would come from the moon,
Right.
and they hadn't seen such a thing. And the only way I tell the story is that they also had this little tailback named Davis. What was Davis's name? Anyway, great little tailback they had who was from Alabama, but he had left Alabama because his mother took him out of there and sent him out. The point is, they killed Alabama. They beat them something like, it was like 44-23, something like that. And Cunningham scored 2 touchdowns, ran all over him. The little tailback Davis scored. And Davis and I were the same, Sam Cunningham and I were the same age, you know?
Right.
We were both the same age. But to your point, he had grown up in Santa Barbara, California, and all that kind of stuff. But that became the beginning of the end because they got destroyed at home. And some of the story was that Bear Bryant knew that the only way that he could begin to foster integration in that conference is to be humiliated at home by a team of predominantly Black players. And that's sort of what, and so that, that really became the beginning. I mean, that's a simplistic version, but that really became the beginning of the end of all those schools down south, Alabama, Texas, and all that, beginning to say, damn, man, we really, for us to compete nationally, we're going to really have to open our doors. What they did not, a lot of white people were freaked out because they were thinking, oh man, these Black guys are going to come in there and they're going to take over. And basically what Bear Bryant told them is, no, they're not going to take over shit. All they're going to do is basically what Black folks have been doing in this country for years. They're going to tote that bar, lift that veil, but they are not going to have power.
Right.
And if you look at the industry now, even in 2020, if you look at the NBA, if you look at the NFL and all that, Black players are still basically toting that bar, lifting that veil. But when you look at the seats of power, who's got the real power,
Right.
It's kind of the same thing that we play and all that, but the power has not really been commensurate with the muscle. So, that's, kind of what happened, or what is happening.
Right.
Not so coincidentally, in 1976, so by the time I think Texas was the last holdout, I want to say they were like 72 when they had their first Black player in college sports, then they instituted the grant and aid cap. Do you think that that's coincidental that all of a sudden now the top teams in the country have predominantly Black players and now they're restricting the access to scholarship and education that they then get?
I guess if you're asking, is there a movement to turn it back and to begin to limit what's been a gush of Black talent, that's a pretty perceptive, if I'm understanding your question correctly, that's a pretty perceptive question because, and one of the things that, part of the reason why writing $40 Million Slaves, and I think, David, you and I have discussed this over the years, is that I just felt that, and you kind of alluded to it when you talked about going to Duke, North Carolina has become a matter of course. And I guess what I was trying to get to is like, listen, man, I know that a lot of young people think that this is just a matter of routine and it's become like a privilege, but there are people who've never liked it. They still don't like it, but it's just so happens that it's gotten to the point that, you can't really, you've almost become dependent on Black muscle now. Not that you like it, you've just been it, but there's any way to roll it back. I mean, I see it every year. We've been doing a thing with Undefeated about the year of the Black quarterback. And that's been a nice thing. We've been talking about Black quarterback, but yet you still see them talk about Trevor Lawrence. You still see them talk, every time there's a white quarterback, you see them, broadcasters, the still predominantly white media, still kind of hyping it up, still talking about it. I mean, they talk about Mahomes and all that because they kind of have to, because that's just the way it is. But whenever there's a Trevor Lawrence, whenever there's a kid at the New York Giants, the kid at Cleveland, at Cleveland, the Cleveland quarterback, whenever, this whole thing of the white hope is still alive and well. And so I think that it's part of your responsibility, you being in the NBA, whatever, is to remind guys, listen, man, we have to somebody passed the torch to us. And yeah, the league is 80% black and all that kind of stuff, but there are people who still don't like this. And you still see our numbers have not become like, we haven't become like ADs. We haven't become the shot callers to make sure this flow of talent continues to come in. So if that's the question you were asking, about the grant and aid and all that kind of stuff, you just have to be ever vigilant, because this stuff, man, is just like, I think a lot of folks, black and white, have taken democracy for granted. Like, yeah, it just happens. But David, as you know, man, you became the leader of a team, but I think that part of that was that leadership. In other words, you look at when you were a rookie and there were older guys, but somebody had to step up. It just didn't happen like that. Somebody had to step up and take the lead. And I think it's the same thing with blacks in the NBA, blacks in the NFL, our democracy. It just doesn't happen. Somebody's got to step up and take the bullet and say, no, so it's all kind of related.
Right.
The other piece of that I want to get at is the control over the players. So to your point, sort of the commodification of black talent, and then how that doesn't translate to coaching positions necessarily, particularly high-ranking coaching positions, coordinators, head coaches. It doesn't translate to front office positions or athletic director positions. From that period that you described in terms of desegregation to today, how much progress do you think has really been made in that context for a balancing of the power between, and giving black talent, I should say, more power in roles after their playing careers?
I don't think it's changed that much. And David can speak to this from the inside, more than I can. From the outside, you just sort of look at, the NBA and NFL. And, in the NFL, the league is I guess it hovers between 67, 68% African American. The NBA, whatever that percentage is, it's pretty high, higher. But for whatever reasons, that has not translated into power. And I guess, David, I've always wanted to have those discussions. To me, the numbers, the percentage mean nothing. It doesn't mean anything. That's like you consistently having a 4-on-1 break, but always fucking it up. So the fact is, what does it mean if we keep on getting these 4-on-1 breaks, but we don't convert?
Right.
And it's the same thing. Like, we 70-80%, but you have like 5 black coaches at best 6, and it's the same thing. You don't have So that's, I guess, my question to you, David. What's the dynamic at play there? Where that has not,
Right. So I've thought about this a little bit, and I think that there's a reason why, if you look at coaching, the most successful coaches black coaches were in the HBCU world, right? So when you talk about the traditional best black coaches, you're talking about coaches that were able to thrive in environments where their power was validated by the structure. So this is something that we don't talk about often in sort of the NBA or the NFL, is the reason why a white coach particularly may have an easier time or easier chance of getting through to players is because his power is also defined in the real life structure. So you see a white head coach, you see a white chief of police, you see a white president, you see white senators, you see White House of Representatives, all those different things. And it's easier to associate, this head coach with the power, and you respect it. The dynamic, and I had to work on this personally, because again, I didn't have a black coach beyond middle school, maybe, and then it was all white coaches until I got to Byron Scott in the NBA. So I had to figure out how to relate to Coach Scott, and I would think about this, as I would have some classes, and even after we had, I wasn't playing for him anymore. I had to sort of humble myself and realize, like, I didn't give him some of the benefit of the doubt that I had given other coaches. And I had to challenge myself on why that was. But I think that there's some dynamics, again, that exist in the world that help reinforce power. And a lot of times, again, a guy might go through his whole career never playing for a black coach.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, how do I deal with this? Because everywhere you turn, everywhere you look, if you're in high school, middle school, your principal's white, your teachers are white, your coach is white. Especially if you're at sort of these elite, prestigious prep
Right.
schools, and you're on the Nike thing. You know what I mean? You're just
Yeah.
it's a different world. So it's a very difficult thing to iron down. And again, guys are, I think, more aware now, are learning more. Again, but like you said, those steps have not been taken to get past or beyond that threshold of just representation.
I appreciate your honesty, and that actually should be something that Black players should write about more, because that's the reality, you know. And in fact, as long as I've been writing about this stuff, I was having a conversation with somebody. I said, we're talking all this stuff about, okay, we need more Black coaches in the NFL, but you know what? Most of these guys have never played for Black coach. So they're out there talking about the shit, intellectually, but like you said, realistically, we haven't had, and if we have never played for a Black coach since grammar school. So if you really are honest, and you probably feel bad about it, like it's kind of like the white man's ice is colder, because like you said, man, because all the power structure has been white, unless you went, and I guess back to my thing about going to an HBCU. A lot of kids who went to Hampton, Howard, all that, who come from these all white environments, they say, damn, man, shit, I'm around. I had to get used to. I've had students, man. It took me years to get used to being around all these Black folks. But then once I got used to it, I realized that I was seeing Black people the way white people saw Black people. When you're around them all the time, it's like that mentality, and so you almost have to forgive yourself. But let me ask you this: I know it's your show, but but these are real conversations, because again, you could talk all this about 80% Black and all that, but what you just said, that's negated by the fact that in our heart of hearts, we kind of think that the white power structure is right. Like they're supposed to be in power. They're supposed to be the executive producers. They're supposed to be the president. They're supposed, and I think that my question to you is, do you think this whole thing of Black Lives Matter has begun to at least change that transformation? Or a guy like LeBron and people like that have begun to change that dynamic?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And again, I think it's, obviously starts with the question, starts with the idea and the conversation around it. But it definitely gives, because of the social media world, and information is right here, and we are seeing things and witnessing things so those of us who, our parents are old enough to tell us, like, this is the real world, but we maybe necessarily didn't see it. Now, because of these videos and all of the reporting, we're getting a firsthand eye view to what's going on. It gives the players a different perspective. When I first came in the NBA, there was no social media, so you had to grab a newspaper and read the newspaper to know what was going on. And then all of a sudden, 5 or 6 years in, it shifts, and now you can just open your phone on the bus and find out what's going on. And I think that dynamic has changed sort of the mindset of the athlete, of the players. Now, there's some resistance to that as well. We talked about this on the show maybe a week or two ago about you've got this pull, right? Because you have the professional world saying you need to use your social media for branding and to stay popular and to stay relevant. But then they're also pulling people away from this sort of idea of going and finding out things for yourself via the same mechanism. So there's this constant pull and push that exists with the players, but I think guys for themselves are starting to come into, information. And ultimately, you want to see guys who are sort of aligned around the idea that they need more seats at the table, need to be in position to take control in certain situations in terms of environment and power structure, because again, you want to have input as to what is going on and what the legacy that you're leaving is going to produce behind you. So I think a guy like, you look at some of these superstar guys, they've already traversed beyond where some guys have been in the past.
Right.
And they're already taking steps that other guys didn't do. And so I think that trend will continue.
I'll turn the show back over to you now.
Yeah, pulling a couple things out that you guys were talking about there, and part of how we built out the PCL's model was allowing our athletes the opportunity to ultimately attend an HBCU for the educational component if they chose, and every team we picked has at least one HBCU in its city, some 3 or 4 in certain cases. how important is that educational piece to changing some of these dynamics as they go through? And especially how important is the educational piece in potentially an HBCU structure or atmosphere, particularly for Black athletes?
Well, again, education, or I don't know education, but critical thinking, I think, is important. I mean, in terms of the whole HBCU dynamic, it's, in some ways that ship has sailed. I know we made a big deal out of the kid going to Howard, McCour Maker going to Howard and all that, and that's fine, and I think he'll be better off for it. But I think in terms of to make that really happen, you need like the Fab Five kind of thing, where 5 of those kids go to a Howard or Hampton, whatever, and they win the national championship. That gets people's attention. When you get one guy, and it's nice, him, but fine, but most of them are still going to go to Kentucky, North Carolina, all that. It's only when like a whole bunch of them start like going to, they start making a dent into the winning.
Right.
Now, but I think that what's as important and more important is wherever you go to school, you just start thinking critically. You start thinking critically of what kind of system that I am. I mean, like David, if you were where you are now, if you were there when you were 18,
right?
And like whoa, you're checking it out immediately, and saying, man, how do we grab control? Whether it's AAU system,
right? How
do we seize control of this? So it's I don't know if it's education as more it is just sort of critically thinking about where is the power and control, kind of thing. So yeah, I want people to support HBCUs in general, but I just want people, whether it was I keep on saying the kid, man, I get these moments. The kid went to Duke, and who what's the name? He was from New Orleans now. Like I would much rather see players like Zion, all those guys, beginning to to think, okay, wait a minute, what kind of impact can I have? All right, I'm leaving Duke after basically 7 months. All right, now what I want Duke to do, as a condition of me choosing to go to Duke, there's a couple of kids in my community who I want to have full scholarships to Duke, because I'm only going for 6 months. But here is Mary and Sally, who are from my community, great grades, great students. They can't afford to go to Duke, but you are going to make them be able to afford to go to Duke. Yeah. They're going to get, so if you have all these high profile athletes, saying, hey, listen, as a condition of me going to your school, this is what you're going to do for my community. Right. To me, that's the exercise in power. And I'd like to see more of that. Those lines. Right. More of that. Like, okay, Alabama's recruiting me to play football, but shit, y'all ain't never had a black AD. Y'all never had a black, why am I going there? You know what? I'd like to go somewhere where there's a black head coach. And I think as soon as high-profile black players start saying that, even if they ultimately go to a white school, sometimes the fear of the riot is worse than the riot itself. So when a kid says, the number one prospect says, you know what, I'm going to a school with a black head coach. Now, as soon as that gets out there, Nick Saban hears it, Dabo Swinney, Krzyzewski here, all these coaches say, damn, man, these kids, and they'll probably be secretly saying, damn, how come it's taking them so long? Get that kind of thing. So so when you say going to HBCU and educate, I guess I want kids just to be more aware of the collective power that they've got. But I think, getting right back to what you said, David, if you are kind of ain't got this slave mentality, you're not ready to take on this. It's kind of like hat in hand, and you doing me a favor. I'm not doing you a favor. Correct. You're doing me a favor. Well, the reality is that if all 22 black players at Alabama said, we ain't playing, there's no show. Right. But you're 20, 19, 18, you're intimidated. You're, the police, like you said, the white police chief, the white thing, you're the president. What are they going to do to me? What are they going to, so that's a problem.
Right. Right. And I think it makes, at least from my perspective, I think it makes for the argument as to why we don't see, players do, go in mass in one direction, right? Like there was a class a few years ago where you got, top 15 of those high school guys end up being, 12 top 10 picks in the NBA. So that class in particular had a lot of power. And it was like those 15 guys could have gone to 3 or 4 different schools and really changed the dynamics. But then, we as adults are saying, okay, do we really think to put that responsibility on a group of 17, 18? It makes it difficult in terms of that, really pinpointing where, we need to address the gap. But I personally believe that it starts with, again, the players, the guys who have been through it, who understand, what's out there. There's so many guys now that I talk to who, want to get into coaching, want to have opportunities to coach and be a part of, universities, be a part of NBA teams, pro teams. But, again, the opportunity simply isn't there.
And it should be. I mean,
right.
I mean, you've been 70, 80% of the league probably for 30 years now.
Right.
So just pure numbers would suggest that that if you've been that for 30 years, you should probably have like 18 black head coaches and at least 10 team presidents in 35 years. But the fact that it hasn't, I guess you gotta sit back, players gotta say, what am I doing? I mean, and how, so but again, I could sit here as a juror, but I guess it's up to players to figure out how do we, and again, I don't know, it just, to me, is baffling, but it's totally, because it's a power dynamic.
Right, it is. Absolutely.
So, if you're not used to having power and afraid to exercise power and all that, it's kind of daunting. But I don't know what you think of LeBron and all that, but it seems like there is some degree of hope. That guys say, well, man, we if we kind of do something like when Milwaukee decided not to play.
Right.
That shit. What was that about? I mean, that wasn't complicated, right? They figured out real quick.
Right.
What do y'all want?
right.
So.
Well, I know you're tight on time, Bill, and we don't want to hold you over. I know we could definitely keep this conversation going, but we really appreciate you joining us and appreciate the time.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me and letting me rant. Appreciate it.
Oh no, it's always good. And I do have one more. I do have one more question, just for my own indulgence, but then also for our listeners. Just generally, I like to ask people, for people who have, in all your years of work, you've interviewed some folks, you've been in different circles, you've met different people, you've represented, different backgrounds in terms of your educational background, but then also the perspective that you represent to the public. You've got a fundamental work, I think, that every athlete that I meet that says, yo, D West, what do I need to read? The first thing I point them to is $40 Million Slave, because I think that it helps give athletes, particularly black athletes, a perspective on the world that they're going into and the world that they're dealing with. So you've achieved quite a bit in your life and you've seen quite a bit. So what are some of the things, again, they don't have to be specific to your line of work, but what are some of the things that you've tried to keep consistent throughout your life so that you can continue on this successful path of representing yourself and representing your ideas?
That is a great question that I think sometimes you don't really think about because you're just so busy doing the work.
Right.
Like you ain't got time to sit back and think. But one thing that's helped me always is just the history. Understanding our history, the history of African Americans in this country. That's really, really, I think is really crucial. For the same, it's crucial because you need to know where you fit in. You need to know that our existence in this country has basically been an eternal relay race with one generation passing the torch to the next and making that younger generation snatch the torch. And then the next generation running as hard as you can, hand it to the next generation. And this idea that this is an eternal relay race. But unless you have a sense of history, you'll ask, well, damn, babe, why are you telling me about some shit that happened in 19 45. I don't care about that. And then you could ask him, well, why do you think Coach Krzyzewski has you spending 90% of your time watching game film? Why do you think your coach has you watching game film 90% of the time? What you're watching ain't nothing in the future. You're watching last year's game, last year's practice, last year. Why do you think they have you spending so time watching shit that happened already if it's not important?
Right.
And then they say, oh, well, because, we need to learn our enemy's mistake. We learn to know what we did wrong. Yeah, exactly. That's the only reason you study history. You say, oh, shit. Like right now, I'm doing something with ESPN. We're doing a thing for Veterans Day, and we're doing something with the Tuskegee Airmen. So I've been watching documentaries. I could have knew about the Tuskegee Airmen, but I've been watching documentaries about the Tuskegee Airmen. And it's incredible. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal how what people were saying about, well, blacks can't fly. Blacks can't go into combat. They can't be combat jet fly. Same shit. Well, blacks can't coach, or blacks can't play football. It's always been this thing. We, as a people, blacks can't teach. Blacks can't, that's what we've been confronted with for 400-something years. Well, blacks can't produce shows. Black can't, and with every generation, you do it, and you succeed, and you break a barrier, only to face another barrier, other barrier, until So that's, I guess my thing has always been understanding, because you get power from that. You get power from whenever you get down, you don't get the job or you're faced with a barrier, you go back to what your great-grandfather had to deal with. You say, shit, what I'm doing? He would laugh. He would laugh. And you said, what? Because you said, boy, do you realize I had no reason to be optimistic about the next day.
Right.
And when you see that, then you can say, you can dust yourself off and let me continue to grind. So that's a long-winded way. I just think you got to understand that kind of stuff to get strength from the past to let you face the present, the future, to know that this is going to be okay, but it's going to be okay because you're going to make it okay.
Right.
So anyway, that's been, to the extent I've got a formula, that's sort of that's been my formula.
Awesome. We really do appreciate it. And as always, I appreciate the time and the conversation.
Hey, me too. Me as well. Appreciate you as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks. We appreciate it.
All right, you guys take care. Good luck.
And thank you for joining us for the latest episode of Forward Thinking, presented by the Professional Collegiate League. We hope you enjoyed our guests, CJ Watson and Bill Rhoden. Next week, we're going to be joined by Kavitha Davidson and Jessica Luther, two great reporters that teamed up to co-write Loving Sports When They Don't Love You Back, The Dilemma of the Modern Fan. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe Forward Thinking at your favorite podcast platform and the PCL YouTube channel. You can get more information on the Forward Thinking podcast and the PCL at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking. We'll see y'all next week. Stay safe.